This is your quick guide to climate forcing, the full movie that breaks down a quiet shift in climate science. That full video has a lot of detail. It's based on hundreds of peer-reviewed papers in top journals and is covered in our textbook. You will get links to the supporting information at the end, but right now, let's hit the highlights. And it actually helps to begin with the UN's World Meteorological Organization. Their Secretary General took a swipe at climate activists for recently becoming like religious extremists and bordering on the verge of being terroristic. Their most terrifying claims were said to not be valid, not be scientific, and be completely unsupported by the data. But why say this? Why say it now? Well, in addition to it being true, it comes as a shift is ongoing in the science at the highest levels, but is not covered one bit in the mainstream news. The IPCC, the UN's climate group, created by the World Meteorological Organization, is about to do something it's never done before. Actually, it's already done it. In the upcoming full report due to release in 2022, solar particle forcing and cosmic rays will be allowed into the global climate models for the first time ever. They released the datasets 2 years ago, and now it's just a matter of time. The full climate forcing movie aimed to describe why they did this, and it was based on hundreds of peer-reviewed papers detailing the correlations and, more recently, the mechanistic action of solar activity's influence on the climate. There is no piece of the climate that has not been touched by this research. Surface temperature, precipitation, jet streams, polar vortex, El Nino, ocean circulation, every large-scale mode or oscillation of the climate has published work showing how it's modulated by the sun. Even on longer scales, the sun's energy can be stored in the oceans for up to 20 or 30 years, causing lags and patterns. And while the studies saying it is all humans' fault continue to pour out of the universities, in the 2 years since the particle dataset for the 2022 report has been released, there have not been any studies using those datasets that were able to show human influence on climate change. Zero. The more covert coup in the climate game actually started at Princeton University in 2017. Over the last 2 years, their demonstration that every single climate model in existence misunderstands the cooling potential of clouds has gone virtually unreported by the mainstream news. And that also goes for Yale's warning of a cold climate bomb waiting to be unleashed in the oceans. The Princeton studies have gone international, with researchers from many nations confirming that the greenhouse effects of clouds don't work so well when they are white and reflect sunlight. Clouds cool here. This isn't Venus. Our clouds aren't dark and transforming light into thermal heat. They bounce it right back off into space. So to review for now, it's not an argument. It's already done. Particle forcing is in. The dataset has been out 2 years, and so far it's a goose egg for human forcing for those scientists who have chosen to use it. Literally hundreds of solar physicists are about to have their life's work no longer be ignored, all while top universities are trying to change the discussion and learning how powerless they are against the media and politics and terroristic outrage culture. But the question must be asked, if they're going to let particle forcing in, is there some problem needing to be solved? What's the thing that's wrong here? Well, to make it simple, without the particle forcing, they have been using only irradiance for the last 40 years, and it has a tiny variation of 0.1% over the primary 11-year solar cycle. That's not going to allow for much climate forcing in any imaginable model. But more importantly, irradiance does this during titanic solar outbursts. Seriously, the largest deliveries of energy to Earth from the sun show up as negative climate forcing. Now, this is due to the particle blasts and X-rays not being absorbed in the upper atmosphere, which is where they look for the irradiance value. When the normal ultraviolet scales up to the X-ray of a solar flare, it is then largely absorbed into Earth's electric layers, like the ionosphere. The papers that drove the IPCC to change and allow in this particle forcing highlight how this electrical energy comes down and affects the lower atmosphere on timescales that can be nearly immediate, especially in terms of pressure and cloud cover. There is a geomagnetic circuit and an atmospheric electric circuit that is now well understood to be faster and more influential than the tiny 0.1% irradiance changes. And add to that fact that the X-rays and particle bursts of coronal mass ejections from the sun scale up tens to hundreds of thousands of times their energy delivery to Earth, and it shows up as negative climate energy. That is what they needed to fix. That is why the IPCC made the change. Again, we're not making any sort of new claim or new argument. This is what's already happened. Now, we know that isotope records show that the 1900s had the strongest solar activity in 11,000 years. Coincidence that the planet warmed. We know from eclipse studies that stratospheric volcanic aerosol cooling has been at near record low. Combine record low volcanic cooling with record high solar activity, and in 2016, during the record El Nino, Earth saw 1 degree of global warming. That's the maximum. 2017 and 2018 came down a bit and were not as warm. So compare the maximum 1 degree of global warming with the sun, volcanoes, and the oceans pushing as hard as they could in that direction, with what happens when the Earth has real climate change. We are lucky enough to live in an interglacial period, at least for now. These small peaks in temperature, the Earth spends most of its time in ice age conditions, but those little peaks upward are interglacials, and that's where we are now. But look at the temperature drop expected to happen. If it looks to you like our interglacial has lasted for quite a while by comparison, and we could be overdue for the drop, that is what the math says too. But alas, the volcanoes shut down. The sun revved up like it hasn't done since the end of the last ice age. And without the quiet volcanoes and super high grand solar maximum, I bet we don't get that 1 degree of warming. And with the sun expected to downshift this century, and with many scientists predicting high volcanic activity throughout the middle of the century, and with the long-term ice age cycle staring at the world looking the other way, this is the type of irony that the snitch known as the universe loves. The last few notes here. We did cover some of their data manipulation and fraudulent reporting in the full video, but for the most part, we were playing devil's advocate against ourselves. We take their assumptions, let them cheat, and basically give them all the breaks. Why not? We already know what happens in the end. Notwithstanding my personal favorite approach of being the underdog, there actually is data fraud and manipulation, etc. For that, please keep up with Tony Heller. Real Climate Science is his site. And so it really is that simple. The full movie was not making any new claims. It was just explaining what has been done, why it was done, and what's expected to happen. There are a lot of ducks in this row, seem to be ADHD when trying to be placed into line, and it will not be until 2022 when that next full report comes out. Before that, it will be story as usual, previous report data as usual. Remember, the new data set was made available way in advance, and so far, the results using it should shake the human global warming proponent to the core. It's not your emotions or your guilt that's important right now. It's math and science. It's a freaking star sitting next to us up there. It's cosmic rays from supernova and galactic jets and gamma ray bursts. It's the long-term, unflinching power of the planet. It's the desalinization of the oceans with cold meltwater. It's the real story of climate forcing. Watch the full movie at the link below. And folks, the PDF copy of our textbook is now available at otf.cells.com. The third edition was requested for May 2020, and universities have recently wiped out the last of the second edition hard copies. There are no more. I have my own 2 copies left, and that's it. otf.cells.com for the PDF version of the second edition, or Summer 2020 for the third edition hard copy. Remember, when you share and discuss these ideas with others, this isn't some new idea or conspiracy. The UN did this already. It's done. And now we wait. Be safe, everyone.